Good day, everyone. Welcome back to English for Academic and Professional Purposes. For our second lesson, we will be discussing the different features and aspects of academic and professional language. For today's lesson, we would be differentiating social or informal language versus academic or formal language. Next, we would also be talking about the different aspects of academic and professional language.
Before we begin, let's look at the following pictures. As you can see, communication is what helps build connections and maintain relationships between and among individuals. It goes without saying that in communicating, the use of language is essential.
When we say language, it simply refers to a system of spoken, signed, and or written communication that is used by humans to express themselves. So it is something that we really use every day because we want to express our thoughts, our ideas, our feelings, our emotions to other people. We can actually categorize language into two main types. The first one is formal language, whereas the second one is called informal language. And I guess most of you are already familiar with the difference between the two. So let's try to differentiate them. Formal language are often used, or is often used rather, for professional and academic purposes. So it's something that we use in businesses. It's something that we use in the academe or in schools, in different institutions, and so on and so forth. Now, in using formal language, there are no colloquialism and contractions involved. Therefore, we try to avoid slangs, for example, words that are commonly used on the streets, words that we often use when we communicate with people we are close with, okay, and certain phrases that we try to avoid and we believe are not appropriate for a formal setting like a business, an office, or a school or an institution. And when we say contractions, these are simply words that we try to shorten by removing certain letters and replacing them with apostrophe. For example, instead of saying cannot, you say can't. In the use of formal language as well, we try to avoid the use of personal nouns or personal pronouns rather, such as I and we. Because of that, we can now characterize formal language as a language that is less personal in nature. Now, let's go to the different characteristics of informal language. Informal language is what we often use every day. Okay, so these are words, phrases, sentences that we form whenever we communicate or write or even have conversations with our family and friends, or even people we are close with, people we get to interact with on a regular basis on a more casual manner. Like what I have mentioned earlier, it is more casual and spontaneous. You don't have to force it. You don't have to think too much about using this kind of language because it goes naturally because you use it every day. Unlike formal language, and formal language is more personal. Like what I have mentioned, this is a type of language that we use with people who we share a relationship with. Even if it's not intimate, as long as you share a close relationship with them, you use a more informal language. As you would notice, the way that you talk to your teachers is very different from the way that you talk with your classmates or with your parents. The way that you talk with your parents is very different from the way that you talk with your siblings. Now, here are some more characteristics that we can look at whenever we are differentiating or we are trying to recognize social or informal language versus academic or formal language. In other books, they would refer to informal language as social language, whereas in other books, they would refer to formal language as academic language. Okay, so let's go at it one at a time. In social language, there is a repetition of words. This only means that we are not very particular with the kind of vocabulary we are using. It's okay if we tend to repeat words. For example, you keep on saying beautiful when you try to characterize or describe something that is pretty. So instead of saying, using different words that refer to something that is beautiful, you keep on saying beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Unlike in academic or formal language, you cannot do that because it seems as if you are being redundant with your descriptions, with your use of adjectives, and so on and so forth. So in academic language or in formal language, there is a variety of words. We use a variety of words. Therefore, it requires a more sophisticated vocabulary. So instead of just saying beautiful and using the word over and over and over again, you try to use synonyms or other words that could refer to the same thing. So take for example, instead of saying beautiful over and over again, you use pretty, you use pleasing to the eyes, okay? So there are certain words that we can use to replace that particular word that we are using, or even phrases. You can use phrases to refer to that particular word. Another thing, in social or informal language, whenever we are using it, more often than not, our sentences would start with and but, especially when we try to transition from one idea to another. Okay. However, in academic or formal language, sentences start with more sophisticated transition words. So instead of saying "and," you can say "in addition to" or "moreover," and then with "but," you can say "however" or "nonetheless." So there are certain transition words that you can use or are seemingly more appropriate whenever we use academic or formal language. Another feature of informal language or social language is, of course, the use of slang, like what I have mentioned earlier. For example, these are words, terms, phrases that came off the street. However, we got so used to hearing them, to using them, that they have been part of our everyday vocabulary or our everyday conversations. Okay, so these are words that we use on a casual manner. And examples include guys, cool, and awesome. Unlike in academic or informal language, slangs are actually not allowed. Instead of slangs, more often than not, academic or formal language uses jargons, okay? Like what I have mentioned in our first lesson. So jargons are terms that are specific in a particular field or used in a specific field, okay? So, for example, let's take this one for example. When you talk to your friends, it's okay for you to call them, hey guys, hey dude, okay? However, when you talk to your boss or someone that is superior to you, okay, who has authority over you, for example, in the office or in the school, okay, so you cannot call your boss hey dude or hey guys, your coworkers, for example, that you are not close with, you cannot call them that. Okay, so there's a certain level of formality that we have to follow, which we also have, or which we will also be discussing later. Now let's go to the different aspects of academic and professional language. When we say aspects of academic and professional language, these are simply things that we have to consider whenever we use formal language. These include formality, complexity, objectivity, explicitness, hedging, precision, and accuracy. We're going to be talking about them one at a time. Let's go first to formality. When we say formality, it's simply referring to the use of language that is appropriate, okay? Appropriate in any situation. And in an academic and professional setting, it has to be fit or appropriate to any situation that has been presented to you in an academic and professional setting. Okay, like what I have mentioned earlier, there's a certain level of formality that we follow depending on who we talk to. Okay, and why is that? Because there are certain rules, certain forms, certain conventions when it comes to writing or in speaking, particular in a specific community or in a particular discipline. Sometimes it feels as if we are not conscious of these rules that I am talking about, or these forms, these conventions that I am talking about. However, it only feels like that because those rules, those norms, these conventions are already ingrained in your brain. It's already been instilled in your head that it goes out or it comes off naturally whenever you are in an academic or professional setting. But best believe it that you already know about these things. Let's talk about the different things to avoid in order for us to achieve formality. The first one is, of course, colloquial words and expressions. Try to avoid using colloquial words and expressions. These are simply words and expressions that we use on typically on a normal day, on a normal basis. Okay, so whenever, whoever you are talking with, especially people you are close with, these are the words that you use. Next, try to avoid using contractions and abbreviations as well. So contractions are simply words wherein we try to remove certain letters and then we make them shorter by removing letters and replacing them with an apostrophe mark. Okay. Similarly, abbreviations are like that. You simply make words shorter or make phrases, make certain terms shorter. So in achieving formality, in order for us to achieve formality, try to avoid doing that thing. Another thing to avoid is, of course, the use of two-word verbs. By using two-word verbs, it simply refers to a verb and then you use a preposition after it. Okay? Just like, for example, bring back. Okay, instead of saying bring back, you can just say return. Instead of saying get off, you can say alight. Okay, so try to replace two-word verbs with a more fitting, more formal, more complex vocabulary. Next is avoid asking questions. In order for you to achieve formality, try to state your statements in a declarative format. An example of this is whenever you state your sentences in this particular manner. It is raining outside, isn't it? Okay, so try to remove the phrase isn't it at the end or towards the end of the sentence and try to reconstruct your sentence in a more fitting or more formal manner. In essays, whenever we write essays and we want to achieve formality, we avoid subheadings, numbering, and bullet points. So as much as possible, express your ideas, express your thoughts, your beliefs, okay? For example, incomplete sentences, incomplete paragraphs, and make sure that those sentences transition smoothly, okay? Flow from one idea to another.
Here's another guide to help you in achieving formality.
Let's move on to the next one, which is complexity. Complexity simply refers to the use of more lexical words than grammatical words. Okay, so let's try to differentiate the two first. When we say lexical words, we simply refer to the content. Okay, what does the word or what specific word is being used and the meaning behind that particular word. Whereas when we say grammatical words, we refer to the function of the words that have been used. Okay, so meaning when we use grammatical words, certain words, these words that we use provide a function. Whereas when we use lexical words, there is meaning, there is content behind that particular use of words. Now, when we say complexity, sentences actually become shorter in length, okay? However, you would notice that you tend to use longer and more complex words and phrases. So what does it mean? Instead of you using multiple short words or multiple short grammatical words, you use longer lexical words and they become more complex in nature as well. Let's try to look at the next example so you would have an idea of what I am talking about. A participant was admitted to the graduate program. It came to him as a surprise. Please take note of the underlined phrase and the underlined sentence. So instead of you saying the participant was admitted to the graduate program, it came to him as a surprise, you can simply state, replace the words was admitted or the phrase was admitted to one word. Okay, though this word is longer, but it expresses the phrase was admitted using only one word. Okay, so instead of saying was admitted, you can transform it to the participant's admission to the graduate program. And instead of stating it came to him as a surprise, on another sentence, okay, you can just attach it to the first sentence. Now, this example is actually an example of nominalization. Okay, nominalization simply refers to us replacing certain words or phrases with another word or a noun. Okay, so take for example, we replace the verb was admitted or the verb phrase was admitted to the noun admission. Okay, that's an example of nominalization. Let's go to the next one. As you can see on the first sentence, how much money will be invested should be determined. The phrase how much was replaced with the phrase the amount on the second sentence. And the second sentence is considered to be more formal in nature. Okay, now this technique is simply us replacing phrases how much with a noun-based phrase. We transform phrases that are introduced with WH questions into noun-based phrases. Okay, so instead of saying how much, you say the amount. Let's take a look at this next example. As you can see on the first one, there are two related sentences. Okay, however, on the second one, to practice complexity, these sentences are combined, or the sentences were transformed into one longer sentence that is combined by a conjunction. In other words, when we want to achieve complexity, we also practice the use of subordinate clauses. For our next example in practicing complexity, look at these two sentences. On the first sentence, you would notice that there are more words and it's longer. Okay, however, on the next sentence, there are less words, but if you're going to read the two of them, they simply refer to the same thing. Okay, now which is more complex? It's not the one that is longer, but actually it's the one that is shorter. Okay, this is what we are trying to say at the very beginning. When we say complexity, it simply refers to the use of more content words. We focus on the nouns, the adjectives, the verbs, and the adverbs. Okay, there's not much focus on function words such as preposition, transition words, conjunctions, etc., etc. So if you could transform these phrases into one word, then so be it. Use that one word. Even if it's longer, you think there are more letters in it, use it because it sounds more formal, it sounds more academic as well. Next, let's go to objectivity. Objectivity simply refers to putting emphasis on the information that you want to give in the arguments that you want to make instead of focusing on you as a writer. Okay, so we are focusing on the idea, the thoughts that we want to express. It is often characterized by the use of the third person rather than the first person. So we don't refer, even if we are the ones writing the text, we don't really refer to ourselves in the first person. So take for example, we don't use personal pronouns such as I. We don't use personal pronouns such as we. Okay, we refer to ourselves even in the third person, the researcher, the writer, and so on and so forth. In this way, we are trying actually to avoid putting bias or incorporating bias in what we are writing, what we are talking about. For example, let's look at these sentences. On the first one, you would notice that it says, or it used the phrase, in my opinion. This is a very interesting study. Whereas on the next one, you just simply state, this is a very interesting study. So even if it was your own belief, even if it was your own thought, try to express it in a more objective manner by removing yourself out of the picture. Another example is this one. Instead of you saying you can easily forget how different life was 50 years ago, you just simply state it is easy to forget how difficult life was 50 years ago. That's more objective sounding. Another example is this one. Instead of saying, as teachers, we need to realize the value of feedback on student writing. Even if I am the teacher writing this particular text, I cannot refer to myself as one. Okay, so instead of saying, as teachers, we, you can simply state, teachers need to realize the value of feedback on student writing. This is another example. Instead of saying, we should consider the impact of motivation in student achievement, you can simply state, motivation impacts student achievement. Now, in practicing objectivity, there is also a form of impersonality whenever we write or whenever we express ourselves in an academic and professional manner. In impersonality, we try to avoid making statements that are not supported by examples and evidence. So if it's something that cannot be backed up by evidence, by other examples, you cannot support it anymore, then we try to avoid it, try to remove those statements because it might seem too personal, too biased, or too subjective. In order to do this, we don't utilize the use of adverbs or adjectives that tend to exaggerate descriptions. So take, for example, we avoid using very much, it was extremely, something like that, something that would exaggerate the beliefs, the thoughts that we are trying to express. Now let's go to explicitness. Explicitness simply refers to the organization of the ideas in the text. Explicitness is something that would show us the relationship and the connection among the ideas in the text that we are writing or in the text that we are reading. You are trying to find the connection between and among them. Explicitness could also refer to us indicating the source of our idea. So it is acknowledging, for example, if we are utilizing other references, then we are acknowledging where that particular idea, where that particular thought came from. In practicing explicitness, we use transitional devices. Transitional devices are simply words that we use so that one idea will flow smoothly to the next. It's something that we use to connect one idea, one sentence to another. So take, for example, when we want to add ideas, okay, you use phrases or words such as furthermore, in addition to, moreover, besides, etc. When you want to showcase sequence, there's step-by-step process that is involved. You use transitional devices or transitional words such as first, second, finally, next, and then. Now, when you want to differentiate two ideas, two things, then you can use phrases such as although, but, despite, etc. Similarly, when you want to elaborate on something by giving examples, you can simply say illustrate, for example, for instance, and so on and so forth. There are also transitional devices that are used, of course, to showcase cause and effect. And these are as a result, because, consequently, for this reason, etc. Transitional devices are also used to indicate time. Okay, so when a time aspect is concerned, you want to showcase time element, then you can use transition words such as until, as long as, etc. It could also be used to indicate place. Words such as here, there, at this point could be used to indicate a specific setting, a physical setting. When you want to make generalization, you can also use transitional words such as commonly, generally, and so on and so forth. Similarly, when you want to identify similarities among and between certain things, then you can use transition words such as and, similarly, likewise, etc. There are also words for giving assertions or giving oppositions about certain things. So if you are not in favor or you want to emphasize on your point, your belief, your argument, then you can use words such as no doubt, surely, of course, certainly, and other words to assert and to oppose certain things. Transitional devices are also used to make references, such as the following examples. Part of practicing explicitness is actually the use of summary words. Summary words are simply catch-all nouns, okay? Catch-all, meaning it encompasses everything, okay? It refers to everything, okay? That functions as a lexical tie between sentences. So this usually follows the pattern this or these plus the summary word that we are using. Okay, so this is an example just to make things clear. The university decided to use English as a medium of instruction in literature classes. So instead of you referring to that particular thing, you can simply use this decision was met with negative reactions from the faculty. So this decision refers to your catch-all phrase and decision was your catch-all now, okay? Another example that we have is the next one. So the study revealed that the scores, you are talking about this particular finding, and then on the next sentence that you're going to use, instead of you being or stating it specifically, then you can use a catch-all phrase, this finding. Next, let's go to hedging. Hedging is simply expressing tentativeness or possibility in communication. So whenever you communicate, there are certain things that you are unsure of. Okay. However, you still don't want to sound as if you don't know that particular thing, or you completely have no idea about that particular thing. So instead of you sounding as if you don't know anything, we try to use hedging so we can still sound more formal, we can still sound academic. In other books, we simply refer to hedging or characterize hedging as the use of cautious or vague language. There's nothing specific, and it is something that is carefully used. Okay. Now, hedging is very important in the academic and professional setting. Why? Because it enables you to express a perspective on certain claims that have not been acclaimed yet by others. Meaning, you are trying to express something that is still not verified, something that people are not yet sure of. Okay. But still, you can still express it in a formal, in a more academic manner. Now, there are certain reasons as to why we use hedging. We use hedging because sometimes there are exceptions to certain findings or results. Okay, or sometimes these results are inconclusive, meaning there is no definite conclusion to it yet. There's nothing specific yet even after conducting the study, particularly in scientific experiments. Okay, so we use hedging for that. Sometimes hedging is also used even if you are sure about what you are trying to say. Okay, sometimes we are definitely sure that this is for a fact. Okay, however, we still want to appear more modest, okay, more down to earth, and we want to show deference to our readers or colleagues. So we try to use hedging. Next one, we also use hedging because we simply want to open up possibilities for discussions. We want to get people talking. We want to get people talk about what we have written, what we have discussed, and so on and so forth. Here are some languages used in hedging. So we use introductory verbs such as the following. We also use certain lexical verbs. There are also modal verbs that we use, and we also utilize adverbs of frequency such as often, sometimes, usually. Similarly, we also use modal adverbs and adjectives, modal nouns, that clauses such as it could be the case that, and to clauses plus an adjective. Let's try to compare the following sentences to understand hedging better. For example, in case A, in both cases, if the policy stipulates the use of either English or Filipino, the faculty, staff, and students will not support it. Okay, that's such a very strong statement. Now next, in both cases, if the policy stipulates the use of either English or Filipino, this might not gain a strong support from the faculty, staff, and students. Okay, now to mitigate the strength of the first sentence, you can see that on the second sentence, it used the phrase, this might not gain. Okay, instead of saying will not support it, the writer hedged the sentence and use this might not gain strong support. Okay, so there's a certain level of uncertainty that is included in this particular sentence.
Now is your turn. Which of the following sentences practices hedging?
Next aspect of professional and academic language use is precision. When we say precision, it simply is referring to the writer or the speaker specifying information, dates, or figures. Okay, so take for example, instead of you saying a lot of people, you can say 50 million people. You can give an exact number. Okay, that is precision.
Here are some examples.
Accuracy, on the other hand, simply refers to using sentences that are free from grammatical errors. Precision refers to being specific about the details that we are providing, and accuracy refers to having error-free sentences, okay? Now, accuracy could also refer to the use of correct and appropriate words. Now, let's review what are the different aspects of professional and academic language. First one is formality, complexity, objectivity, explicitness, hedging, precision, and accuracy. Here are my sources and references. Thank you for joining me today.